Welcome to Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. Legal issues simplified through real client stories and real-world experiences. Creating simplicity in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the first episode of the Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. I am your host, ByrdAdatto, with my co-host, Michael Byrd.
Thanks, Brad. As a business and healthcare law firm, we meet a lot of interesting people and hear some amazing stories. In today's episode, we're going to start with the first story, our story.
This should be good.
Have you heard of functional magnetic resonance imaging?
Yes, and where are you going with this?
Well, that's a mouthful. For those that don't know, fMRI tracks the flow of blood in the brain to see what areas of the brain are active at different times. Apparently, there's been some research using fMRI on the power of storytelling. Apparently, the research indicates that the activity in the listener's brain follows and mirrors the activity in the brain of the storyteller. So the listener's brain syncs with the storyteller's, and they speculate this may be why we say we're captivated by a story, or that the storyteller has the audience in the palm of their hands. Now, this is above my pay grade. That's pretty wild.
Captivating?
Yes. Well, seriously, I connect with this idea about the power of a story when I think about how we first met. I mean, think back to 2005 and all the commonalities that we had in our lives. We were introduced by a mutual friend. Of course, we both were healthcare attorneys with the same core focus. We practiced in the same areas of business law, and we had similar backgrounds, similar interests, well, other than our rooting interest for our favorite NFL teams.
Saints.
Cowboys. But think about what we spent the entire 2 hours of our first meeting together talking about.
Hurricane Katrina.
It was amazing. I mean, I was completely captivated by what was happening in your life at that moment. I can remember distinctly you talking about losing your house that you had just closed on less than 48 hours prior to losing everything, your house being flooded. I can remember distinctly talking about your drive back and forth from near Baton Rouge to the office every day, and it would take 2 hours, and just the struggle of driving even to go to try to get your possessions out of your house, and what that looked like. It was, I believe that the connection we formed when over that conversation really set the foundation for all that we've been through over the last 15 years. We've been through a lot at home, in our home lives, and at work. And that connection really just built the foundation.
Yeah, no, I actually remember that lunch well. During that time, as you said, I was living outside of Baton Rouge, and I was taking lots of phone calls, and actually I was in town for interviews at a couple other firms, and we ended up saying, hey, why don't we just grab a lunch? And you were one of the first persons that didn't just treat me like an interviewee. You were actually interested in hearing my story. So it was really the first time I actually spent time speaking to anyone at length about my story. And so don't take this the wrong way, but, I did feel like a connection with you. It was not like a random, it wasn't an interview. It was as if two colleagues were getting together to catch up and break bread. So it was a different feel altogether. And so that my ability to tell a story that you were engaged in also felt like you and I were making a connection otherwise that I would not have made on a typical first encounter.
Right. So we're starting a podcast, and we have to talk about that today. That's why we're here. And you know this well about me now, Brad, but most know that for me, context is king.
Context king is tattooed across his back, by the way.
So, for context, we can't talk about the podcast without talking about our firm that we formed, ByrdAdatto. And I don't feel like we can talk about ByrdAdatto without talking first about ourselves. So, Brad, introduce yourself to the audience.
Hello, audience. My name is Bradford Ellis Adatto. I'm a Gemini. I like drinking pina coladas and getting lost in the rain.
Okay, well, let's not make this for a dating app and give a little bit of a broader introduction.
Sure. I met my wife, Micah, at TCU on a blind date. Go Frogs. And that poor girl's been with me since November of 1993. We have two mostly wonderful children. Ellis, my oldest, is 15, getting ready to go into high school. The kid is a natural long-distance runner and very jealous how easy he can run, and a great student on top of that. Madeline is my 12-year-old. She's about to start middle school. She is a gifted artist and loves playing volleyball. And for better or for worse, has incredible wit, because sometimes it can be wonderful and sometimes it can be terrible. But on a given Friday night, if you want to come by the Adatto house, you will find us sitting in front of the TV eating pizza, because pizza and movie night is a big deal at our house. And then, as Michael kind of mentioned early on, I was living in New Orleans during Katrina, and that's where I grew up. And I grew up with my father being an orthopedic surgeon. I watched him run his practice, and I knew early on I did not want to be a doctor, but I wanted to be my own boss.
Tell the audience one thing that you would want them to know about you.
Besides my background with the family, I would say I've been really blessed in my life. I have friends I've made in kindergarten that I still in contact with. And this is obviously pre-social media, so I've always kept up with them. And the other thing I can say, I have been, in my career, I have been surrounded by really incredible mentors. They always have been willing to spend time and energy with me as a young buck. And I discovered I really love learning from them, which makes me a lifelong learner. And because I had these incredible guides in my life, I look back and think I want to do the same for others. And so I enjoy mentoring people and giving them the knowledge I have. And as Michael's heard me say multiple times, I'm no smarter than I was yesterday. I just have a lot more knowledge. Michael, how about your turn? Why don't you give a little snapshot of your story?
Okay, well, I'm going to skip the dating app version. And so my wife is Stephanie Byrd, and she is also an attorney, which is really not fair for our children. She is general counsel for a company called the Hall Group. We could do an entire podcast on our family story, so this is the abridged version. We're an adoptive family. We have 5 amazing kids. Christopher and Caroline are my 2 oldest, and as of the date of this recording, my daughter Caroline has both graduated college and become engaged to be married in the matter of about 48 hours.
Whoop, whoop.
Yep. And her older brother, Christopher, by a year, is also living in Fayetteville. And so we have a close connection to Fayetteville, despite the fact that was our one of our rivals when I was in college. So going down with our 5 kids, it's a basketball team. Next is Aiden. He's in high school. Aiden is a sports fanatic like me, at least playing, not necessarily watching, but he has played all the different sports. His current passion is football. Next down is Ava. She starts high school next year, and so she is into art and excited for that next phase as she's finishing off the treacherous middle school years while learning from home or social distancing or whatever the right term of art is. And then finally, our youngest, Alex, is 11, going on 30. She gets along really well with Brad's daughter, Madeline.
Yes.
Similar characteristics, and which are mostly great. They can be challenging, especially when you're sheltering at home. Alex was born in Ethiopia, and has our whole family in the palm of her hand. So finally, I guess the last part of it is, like you, Brad, my professional life has been significantly influenced by my dad, Steve Byrd. He's a plastic surgeon and a business owner. And so I saw growing up kind of the business of medicine, owning a business, and significantly influenced kind of my career path.
Awesome. Now let's share one thing that you want the audience to know about you besides your family.
I think one of my gifts is being able to stay calm in the face of hard things. So, like everyone, my life is not what you see on Instagram or Facebook. I have so many blessings in my life, and have also been through some incredibly difficult and painful life experiences. And what I've seen over the years is that everything seems to slow down for me when life comes crashing down, and I'm able to stay calm through that and persevere. And I've seen that play out in how I've helped clients through incredibly difficult circumstances, and felt like I've been helpful to them when there was chaos in their life. And one thing I've seen is that, each one grows me, each experience grows me and prepares me for the next. And so while I would say I've never prepared or thought about preparing for a pandemic, I do feel like those life experiences have helped me in the midst of that.
Yeah, I'm just going to say I'm very disappointed that you have not prepared for that. I mean, it's a thing, every 100 years, Michael.
Yes. Well, I'm going to start doing some research to prepare for the next thing, whether it's a great flood. Oh, wait, you've already been through that. Maybe you need to tell me.
Yeah, no doubt.
So, Brad, we have some context now. Tell us about ByrdAdatto.
Well, the quick version of it is ByrdAdatto is a national boutique business and healthcare firm. We are actually based here in Dallas, Texas, but we have a Chicago office, and we also have a satellite office in North Carolina. And the best way to understand who we are, 100% what we do is business law, but of our clientele, 75% of our clients are in the healthcare industry. And it's not just Michael and I, that we do have 13 attorneys altogether, including, as like I said, 2 in Chicago, 1 in North Carolina. Yeah,
Brad. I mean, the team that we have is what carries the day for ByrdAdatto. We, not only, have our 13 attorneys and have our multiple offices, we have an amazing team that helps us with things like podcasts and ByrdAdatto University and other things. And so that definitely is a huge part of our story.
And clarification, Michael, are we all just lawyers, or is there someone else on our team that's not just a lawyer?
We have an amazing connection to the business of medicine, and Brad and I think it starts with our fathers being plastic surgeons, but we also now have a spouse of a doctor and an attorney who also happens to be a neurosurgeon.
Just happens to be a doctor, yeah.
So we learned a little bit about you. Talk about your early professional life.
Yeah, so like I said, I went to TCU, and after graduating, I've made my way back to New Orleans and attended the University of Loyola Law School of Law, where my last 2 years, I ended up spending most of my time actually at the DA's office, which is great for a cocktail story, and I probably have a lot of fun stories I could tell, but not for today. And for a host of reasons, after I graduated, I actually turned down the DA's office to get a job at a company called Management MD as one of their assistant in-house counsels. Now, Management MD was a management service organization. It focused on running physicians' offices and other ancillaries. And at that time, if you remember, as I said, I had a great mentor, and his name was Randy Bissell. And just sadly, Randy did pass away last week. But I learned a ton from Randy on the business side of running a medical practice and running a management company, more than I learned on the legal side. And because of that, he was a huge influence in my life. But we had a great outside healthcare attorney that we worked with. Her name was Kathy DeBrule. And Kathy eventually recruited me away from Management MD. And when I went to work with Kathy, 100% of her clients were in the healthcare industry. We were very heavy in regulatory analysis and doing transaction all across the Gulf Coast. And she helped mentor me into hopefully becoming a great lawyer, but more importantly, mentored me in the business of being a lawyer. And then after Katrina, I joined you at our former firm. Now your turn.
Okay. All right. Well, I alluded to this earlier when I talked about my Arkansas kids. I actually went to UT in Austin, and many people today don't remember back to the Southwest Conference.
Yep.
And you were part of that at TCU.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Arkansas was a big rival, and so I had never been to Fayetteville until my kids went to college. Big UT fan, and then obviously graduated there with a degree in finance, and then went to Texas Tech Law School. And one of my pet peeves is when people ask me if I'm rooting for Texas Tech in sports. I'm a UT guy. And then out of law school, I came back to Dallas. I grew up in Dallas and joined a big law firm when I got here. And I actually was in business law, but I was a litigator. And so that influenced, a big part of how I see the world when I'm advising clients, even today, just knowing, how things, when conflict goes to that level, plays out in the courtroom. About 3 years into my career, I switched firms to the firm that you and I joined forces with many years ago. And I actually initially was hired there to continue in business litigation. I did early on at my big law firm had my dad and a few of his colleagues that would hire us and give me pet projects. And I didn't know the first thing about healthcare law, but they trusted me because I was my dad's son. And so they figured I may not know what I'm doing, but I'm not going to, mess them around. And that ended up, really being the seeds towards what, later became my practice and our practice when we joined together. So by the time you and I had joined together, I had started a transactional business counsel section of our firm. The mix of that practice was really 75% business and 25% healthcare, and was definitely moving away from litigation at that time. So that brings us up to the time that we had this lunch we were talking about, and share what made you decide to join forces with me as opposed to all the other opportunities you were looking at.
Yeah, I mean, besides that awesome lunch that was impactful, as you can tell, we're still talking about it. One of the reasons why I thought that it would be a good fit for us is that I had spent now the vast majority of my career dealing with healthcare market, and I wanted to go work with someone who was basically the same age as me, even though you're old. And I felt like
I heard that.
I'm surprised. I felt like by finding the right partner and moving my family from Louisiana to a location, I want to find a place that I could make my home. I didn't want to move again, and you seemed like it would be the right fit. And the reason why is because you and I had a lot of philosophies that were similar about how we were going to grow the practice. And with me coming from almost 100% what I was doing was on the healthcare side, it made sense that we could kind of grow this together.
And really, you couldn't have drawn up how it played out better. I mean, it's one thing when you're sitting at lunches and talking about what could be, but to see how quickly we found success and found just, that we had tapped into something that wasn't out there. And that's healthcare attorneys that are primarily business attorneys first, but also have a deep understanding of the regulatory side, and really that are focused on the provider side. I mean, we had doctors and dentists and people that did business with doctors and dentists or in that provider side space. And you just didn't see a lot of other attorneys out there that were so focused. And so from that 2006 to 2014, we grew, I think beyond even our wildest dreams. And I think what we couldn't have even predicted was just how influential our public speaking around the country would be on that growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you referenced, our life did change in 2014. Unfortunately, we had some conflict at our old firm, but with all conflicts, it gave us opportunities to really sit down and figure out what do we want to do when we grew up. And we spent a lot of time debating and realizing that although the risk was higher, we really, going back to our dads, we wanted to be our own bosses and start our own firm.
So I did make it sound like when we started back in 2006 that it went off without a hitch. And in retrospect, it did. It is funny that we skip over the fact that like a year and a half into you joining was the big recession of 2008.
Yeah. Good times.
So we did get through that trial together. But this time when we started our new firm, it went off without a hitch, right?
No, we can say, we had some additional challenges when we started our new firm. Like our space wasn't ready. We didn't have a website. The IT company that we had hired really wasn't getting our system up and running for the day we were supposed to be out and about. And it felt like one of those, besides what happened, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you enjoy the play?
Yeah. And yet it was an amazing time. I just remember just being invigorated with what we were doing for a living in a new and different way. We had for so many years lived vicariously through our clients who had taken a risk and started a business, whether it was a practice or some other type of business. And I wouldn't trade any of it. I mean, we got to walk in each day and just see what we were building. And, it's amazing to just think emotionally how we just wanted to keep the lights on when we started and how quickly we started seeing the possibilities. And it was pretty amazing. And so, we don't have to skip too far from 2015 to 2016. And we started talking about opening an office in Chicago.
Yeah. I think we give a little, going back to the Michael Byrd context moment. As Michael mentioned earlier, we are blessed to have a lot of opportunities to speak at not a lot of different national trade shows. And Michael happened to be in Vegas speaking at one of those shows. And some guy who's an attorney happened to be on that panel with him from Chicago. And I get a phone call, which every dad wants to hear from their child. Hey, man, I went to the bar. I got drunk with this guy, and I think we need to partner with him.
That cannot be proven.
And the funny thing was, he was right. We ended up having multiple conversations with some gentleman named Alex Tiersch, those who might know him. And we ended up deciding that after many conversations and lots of flights back and forth to Chicago and Dallas, that we should try to figure a way to partner together. And we did. And in fact, we ended up the day we opened the Chicago office was November 2nd, 2016. And for those who have a good memory, that also happens to be the same day that the Chicago Cubs won the World Series for the first time in almost 100 years. So you go figure it out if it's, maybe coincidence. ByrdAdatto finally has a Chicago office and the Cubs win.
Yeah. To be fair, you are totally taking credit for that.
Obviously.
So we've been taking a long, winding road with plenty of context, as I like it, and to arrive at why we're even here, which is that we're launching a podcast. So the seeds of us launching a podcast started back when we started ByrdAdatto University in 2017. And again, a story I remember distinctly, Brad. I was in your office. We were meeting with our now partner, Renee, who is in from the Chicago office. They had just started with us, 6, 7, 8 months ago. Renee was transitioning from really being a prolific employment lawyer to adding on some of the other elements that we do when we're representing our businesses. And she was looking for CLEs on, kind of business law type principles. We were looking for it. We were all getting frustrated. And I don't know where the light bulb is. I think you took credit for it, right?
100% took credit for it. Yes.
Okay, so the Cubs winning the World Series and ByrdAdatto University are all Brad. But no, seriously, what was cool was it dawned on us that we go around teaching around the country. We can just teach ourselves internally. And it, in many ways, was nothing new. We have been using education and training as a part of how we help people for many, many years. But it really sealed that becoming a foundational principle for us when we decided that day to launch ByrdAdatto University, use it inwardly to help people in our office learn and help learn from one another, and then also continue and grow externally to share what we know with others.
Yeah, and that the education piece is something that's so strong as to who we are, and obviously going around speaking nationally was the way we were doing it. And what we wanted to do with this podcast is keep educating and training individuals who couldn't attend these associations. And we see that there's a gap in people understanding what's going on, especially in healthcare, because a lot of people run businesses, but when you fall in the healthcare industry, understanding how to compliantly running is so important. And that's one of the reasons why we feel like this podcast is going to help you.
Healthcare is heavily regulated. We've talked for years about how we almost feel sorry for healthcare attorneys who are on an island at a firm as the only healthcare attorney, because
that's just wrong.
It's so difficult. And we even built our model here about how we charge our clients around the fact that, we know it takes a team to make sure that we're testing what we're thinking, because it gets so nuanced. And we know if it's hard for us, think about for those who that's not their business. They're in the business of medicine, not in the legal aspects of it.
And that kind of brings us back to the full circle of the power of story. What we have learned when we're either advising clients or even lecturing is people are more engaged and learn more from us than when we tell a story, than when we tell them the actual law.
And that's our hope with this podcast. Is there's a lot of wisdom that we've gained, that our clients have gained through their experiences, and we want to bring those to the podcast, obviously in a confidential way with names removed. And we believe that this is going to help form a real connection to these complicated business and healthcare issues that will impact the business side of medicine.
Yeah, and our goal is, as we always is to give practical takeaways from each story in a way that is understandable to the audience. This is why we call the podcast Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. We're challenging ourselves to communicate in compelling ways with compelling topics and to simplify it so that you can understand it in a story.
Our first core value at ByrdAdatto is communicate. And where it comes in here is we spend a lot of time trying to take these complicated issues and turn it into plain English. We know that the legal talk is not the language that most normal people speak.
No, they hate it.
So there is a little bit of a translation to take something that's really difficult and turn it into something that is easy to digest. And we're inspired by the popularity of our 123s series that from our blog on banter on our ByrdAdatto website.
We're looking forward to spending time with you, telling our stories that we can share, and obviously throughout time learning your stories so that we can share with others. Because as we said from the beginning of this podcast, the best way to learn something is to hear a story, take away what you can do to make it better for yourself, and most importantly, make it better for your team.
Awesome. I'm excited.
Thanks again for joining us today. And remember, if you like this episode, please subscribe, make sure to give us a 5-star rating, and share with your friends.
You can also sign up for the ByrdAdatto newsletter by going to our website at ByrdAdatto.com.
ByrdAdatto is providing this podcast as a public service. This podcast is for educational purposes only. This podcast does not constitute legal advice, nor does it establish an attorney-client relationship. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by ByrdAdatto. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Please consult with an attorney on your legal issues.